Hello, everybody. I'm Carla Meske, and I'm with SpiritHealer.com, and you have joined one of our pop-up circles. And a pop-up circle is a quickly pulled together gathering around a special interest, and in this case, it's the talk of the globe, coronavirus, COVID-19. And we have a special guest tonight, Lawrence Birch from Corvallis, Oregon, and Southern California. And he's going to be sharing information about COVID-19 with us, although we're all like swamped with it now. But mostly important, he'll be sharing information about herbal protection and remedy for it. I am going to be calling in the spirits, and then I'll turn it over to Lawrence. And then after Lawrence has spoken for 45 minutes or so, we're going to do ceremony. And the ceremony is really important because we have another special guest of honor on tonight, who is Joanna from the Red Zone of Italy. And she lives in a town near Venice. And she has done ceremony of great power. And her town doesn't have any virus. Let me repeat that. She is in Italy, in the Red Zone, and her town does not have any virus. Truth. Is that still true, Joanna? Or am I a liar today?
No. Hello, everybody. No, this is still true. I just saw the statistics this morning. It's midnight, so it's like 10 hours before. We are still free and protected.
So Joanna is going to be supporting. We put our heads together on, and our whole circle, we've put our heads together on to how to make this ceremony really powerful. So let me call in the spirits, and then the calling in is going to be important because this is the beginning of the ceremony. I'm going to call them in a special way so that we're invoking the ceremony's sacred space right now. Here we go. I call the spirits of the north, the power animals and the teachers and the compassionate spirits of the north, the gateway of the stars. And I ask you please to come in, and for each of you to see the spirits of the north who have been the most protected, most powerful, most influential for you in all of your shamanic lives. And if you don't have a shamanic life, to see the power animals, ancestors, and supportive beings that you have heart awareness of. I see the ice bear, and I see your power and your spirits coming in great number. And I ask them to call the spirits beyond those spirits and the spirits beyond those of the north to come. For this is not just a ceremony for us, it is for Earth. And I call the spirits of the northeast, the beautiful forests with their rich interlaced mycelium and roots, and all the life of soil, and the diverse plants, and the thick canopy filled with the animals and the life of the forest, healthy. And I call the spirits of the east, gateway of dawn, for our ancestors to come, and with them to come the she, the Tuatha, and all of the fairy people from all the cultures to come. They have understanding of the remedies here. Ole, and I call the spirits of the southeast, the wisdom of the old ways, the folk wisdom, the root work wisdom, the wisdom of remedies, and the gorgeous lakes and swamps and forests of the southeast. And I call the spirits of the south, gateway of earth, that your teachers, your tribes, the spirit circles where you work, the wisdom of the elders, of your library, of your knowledge of all your lifetimes, and that your teacher come in from the south and prepare the central circle that we stand in collectively, all the teachers. And I call the spirits of the southwest of rock, solid knowing, earth immutable, and the power of the wind and the rain with her, and the power of the fire with her. I open the gateway of the southwest for the elements, that they may each take their place as you see fit in the direction. And I call the spirits of the west, gateway of twilight. And we call those who shuffle us back and forth between the worlds of betwixt and between. And we ask that the spirit who ferries in soul come to retrieve the soul that we need to be the strongest we can be, and to stand in preparation for us as we do our work, as we collectively face this onslaught, this change, this transition. And I call the spirits of the northeast, grandmother of the silver cup, the shimmering wisdom of divine inspiration, that she may raise the light above our heads, and we open above us the portal to the stars that birthed us, and the blue and white light of divine inspiration, purity, and creative life force that gives each cell its wisdom, that informs our immune systems, that informs the balance of the world. And I ask that power to reach down now into the mother, into the earth through the roots. And I ask you now, with your spirits around you, to call your sacred ancestral tree to be with you and with us. And that your teachers, your power animals, your helping spirit be with you and with us. And for us to stand now as a collective circle, a circle of circles of circles of circles beyond, connected to all who are working to restore balance and protection, bring comfort and healing. May we be the people we've been waiting for right now. Grandmother, please light the fire in the center of the circle, and may your teachers place into the center your understanding of power. And so it is. When we do ceremony, we'll do a quick reminder of that call-in, but that call-in sets the stage for us. And I would like to introduce you to Lawrence Birch. Lawrence, will you say hello, please?
Hi, everybody. How is everybody doing today?
We have quite a few people on the call. It's a lovely, lovely thing. Lawrence, you might want to give a few words of introduction and then share with us the wisdom you have about coronavirus, please.
All right. Well, first thing I should say is I've got a little virus myself. Probably not the coronavirus, but I have been a little bit under the weather for about 10 days now. I'm finally on the mend. It's a little odd when you're an herbalist to admit that you've got an illness because we're all supposed to be perfectly healthy all the time, but I'm human like everybody else. So, so if I cough or if I reach for a lozenge, it's because I'm trying to preserve my voice and make sure that things are going well. In a nutshell, I've been an herbalist since I was 18, and I'm a pretty old guy now, so you can imagine how long I've been working with plants. I started wildcrafting. Basically, that means I go out and gather my own medicines in 1991 when I began a 2-year apprenticeship with a local herbalist named Howie Brownstein. I started my own company called Giving Tree Farm Herb Company in 1993. First product I made was herbal smoky mixtures, and I sold it at a Grateful Dead concert. So the Grateful Dead helped pay my rent and started my business. Since then, I've also studied shamanism. I've been a shamanic practitioner since 1998, and I've been a clinical herbalist since the year 2000. I have a bachelor's degree in painting, one of those degrees that you get when you want to really go out in the world and make a lot of money. And I also have taught anatomy and physiology at Lane Community College down in Eugene for 8 years, from 2005 to 2013. So currently, I run my business, Giving Tree Farm, with herbal consultations that I do one-on-one, and I make herbal products for my clients, and I also teach classes for the community, and as well as in Orange County, where I divide my time, Orange County, California, where I also give psychic readings, tarot readings, and I'm also a shamanic healer down there as well. So, so I thought I would start off talking today about the coronavirus and herbal approaches for it. After that lovely introduction by Carla to set the stage for protection and healing, just by giving some disclaimers so people are clear about the information that I'm going to share with you. First disclaimer is that I'm not giving you a cure for the coronavirus. I wish I could. I know that everybody out there has their own spiritual belief systems and works with that, and I support your efforts in that. My goal is really just to give you some herbal information, and I'm not a licensed medical professional. My certification in herbalism doesn't really mean anything. Unless you know Michael Moore, the herbalist, and know about herbs, then it carries some impact that way. I can't give medical advice, I can't prescribe, and I can't treat medical conditions. I'm not a naturopath or an MD or anything like that. So by listening to me, you're kind of agreeing to at your own risk. And if you do decide to work with me after the lecture, which I'm completely happy to have new clients, then we can talk about that afterwards. But basically, to become a client, you just have to fill out an intake process, and that way we can take a look at your health history and decide what herbs might be best for you, if any. Okay. So a couple other things. There may be some facts that I share that are new to you. There may also be some opinions that I share that you may not agree with. That's perfectly fine. And my goal here is really just to give you my take on the science that's currently developing about the coronavirus, as well as herbs that you can use to support your immune system and potentially protect yourself from the virus specifically. Although, another disclaimer about that, none of these herbs have been scientifically proven to work against the coronavirus, mostly because it's just too novel, which means it's too new. But many of them have strong antiviral properties or immune supportive properties in general, or other things about them that are really helpful for many different kinds of illnesses. So, okay, so what I'm going to also ask you to do is we're going to make some time for questions after my main lecture is over. And so if you have questions, a good idea would be just to write them down so you don't have to keep thinking about them while I'm talking and lose track of the information I'm giving you. Okay. So the coronavirus is basically a respiratory virus. It's a virus in a family of different viruses. And one of its names is SARS, S-A-R-S. And so basically that stands for a severe acute respiratory syndrome. And that's generally, in a nutshell, what the coronavirus does. It goes after your respiratory system, attacking the cells that line your upper respiratory as well as your lower respiratory tract, and cause inflammation, and then your body reacts to that by going after the virus. And also, because this is how our immune system works, it goes after kind of everything in the area, in a sense. And that's because our body basically has kind of a blitzkrieg approach when it comes to these kinds of infectious illnesses, meaning that it just throws everything at the surrounding area once it recognizes a pathogen or an infectious organism that is not friendly, not a symbiote, to use the terminology. And that can create problems when our body responds to it. So the pathogen itself has its own problematic things that it does, but what actually can get people into trouble with coronaviruses, because there are other types of coronaviruses, is our body's overreaction, you could say. And there's a term that's been bandied about called the cytokine storm. And that's basically your immune system, like I said, throwing everything at this virus, and in the process damaging healthy tissue as collateral damage, which isn't a term I like, but that's basically the way to think about it. So what often happens is people don't end up getting ill from just the virus, it's the body's response to it. And the concept behind that is kind of a marriage of germ theory, right, which Louis Pasteur is kind of the person we go to for that concept, the idea that microbes create disease. And then also there's a man named Virchow and some other people that were contemporaries of Pasteur's, who also paralleled his development of germ theory with the idea of the terrain or the soil, right? And that means our bodies, right? So the concept there is that it's not just the pathogens that create illness, it's also how we respond to it and what kinds of things are going on in our body to make our cells more or less vulnerable. And really, this is where herbs come in, because herbs are really, in my view, of course I'm biased, obviously, one of the best things you can use as an ally, of course, both on the spiritual level, but on the physical level, to prevent illness and help you heal from illness, and to help check the symptoms. So one more thing about the coronavirus, just as an interesting aside. Corona means crown. And if you were able to see the actual electron micrograph of the coronavirus, you'd see that it has these protein kind of spikes that come out of it all around its membrane that make it look like a crown. So that's where that name came from. Okay. So the coronavirus basically, like all viruses, can't replicate. So it's either the most complex non-living organism, or it's the most complex, let's see, did I say that right? Can't get fooled again. A virus is either a very simple living organism or a very complex non-living organism. There we go. And that's because it kind of straddles that line between what we define biologically as life and what isn't. One of the key things that we assign the quality of life to from a biological science perspective is an organism that can reproduce itself. And viruses can't. And that's why they need a host. And we end up being the host along with other living organisms. So the virus basically, on a cellular level, connects with our cells and takes over the genetic process of the cell to make copies of itself. And this is where the problem comes in, because we don't particularly like having our cells forced to do the bidding of a pathogen. And the virus takes over more and more cells, and then ends up alerting the immune system, weakening and killing those cells eventually when they burst out of a cell that they've taken advantage of. And then they go on to infect other cells unless the body is able to, through whatever means, control that process, okay? So a lot of details in there, trying not to make it too boring. You may know that some of these things, you may not. Basically, the other aspect of what's going on with this condition, with the coronavirus disease, is communicability. Okay, and that's a really important thing to think about. That's where washing your hands come in, and not getting too close to people right now, just to protect yourself, and other things you would do normally when there's any kind of infectious agent about. And we're still in cold and flu season. This is just one more kind of microbe that's entered into the system. The reason why people are a little bit, I would say, freaked out about it is because we're not sure yet of its mortality rate, but most of the numbers seem to indicate that it's got a much higher mortality rate than the usual influenza virus that goes around and does kill people, but mostly just makes people sick. And the vulnerable populations that we're concerned about are mostly elderly people and people with either immune compromise or people that have issues with their respiratory systems. So somebody like chronic smoker, somebody who's developed COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, that sort of thing. If you're not in that category, to the best of my knowledge, with the current information I have, of course this could change, you're probably not at risk for developing anything more than a severe respiratory infection should you catch the coronavirus. So that should come as some news of relief to people who might be anxious or wondering or afraid that this is going to be something that's really going to cause problems. The other thing to keep in mind is everybody's going to probably come in contact with this no matter what steps are taken at this point. And the reason for that is the opportunity we had to prevent the virus from coming to Turtle Island, to the North, South, and Middle American continent, that passed a long time ago. And I'm going to do the best I can to stay focused and not get into the political about this, but let's just say a lot of balls were dropped in a lot of ways, and we're kind of paying the price for it now, unfortunately. There's a lot of finger pointing going on. None of it's productive. What is productive is for all of us to stay focused and to do whatever we can to stay healthy, because as long as we're healthy and taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be an agent of infection for anybody else. And I'll just do a quick aside about vaccines. I know some of you may have been vaccinated. I know I have. I've still got a scar from the polio vaccine I was given. I was also given an oral polio vaccine because I'm an old guy, and that's also what they did. There's a lot of controversy in the alternative community around vaccines. And I come down on the side of being pretty pro-vaccine. I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any means. There are some issues here and there with vaccines, but they're one of the cheapest, most effective ways we have of preventing illness. Now, I'm not going to advocate for somebody to take every vaccine that's available every time, but I do feel like some of the links that have been made between vaccines and certain illnesses, autism, let's just choose one, being chief among them, are really not provable by science. And there's a concept in science that's really important for us to just put out there, which is correlation does not equal causation. And what that means is you may observe something But that doesn't mean that what you've observed is caused by something that you also observed at the same time. So in other words, let's use smoking as an example. You can smoke cigarettes all your life and never get cancer. Somebody could pick up a cigarette tomorrow and get cancer the next day or be diagnosed with it. Does that mean that the cigarette smoke, that the person who has cancer, a cancer diagnosis, that the cigarette caused that? Well, possibly not. It's the same with vaccines. There are people that have children with autism symptoms that develop, and they've noticed a pattern with vaccine regimens. But this has been a debate that's been going on for well over a decade without any scientific evidence. And of course, you're going to have to make your own decisions about it. But there's not going to be a vaccine developed for the coronavirus anytime soon, despite what certain people are saying. And there may never be one, because developing vaccines require a tremendous amount of time, money, effort. And you could say, not very scientifically, good luck, because viruses are not that easy all the time to predict, and they have this quality of mutating that happens. So you can develop a vaccine for some kinds of viruses, like smallpox, for example, which is relatively stable in terms of its genetic mutability, and that's going to be effective. But something like HIV, which we've been working on for decades now, still don't have a vaccine for it because it's highly mutable. Okay, so that's my too long of an aside about vaccines, and let's go ahead and talk about some other things. So the thing to keep in mind about the coronavirus is that it has something called an incubation period. Okay, and really there are about 5 periods in an infectious disease, 5 cycles. Right? There's something called the incubation period. Then there's something called the prodromal period, and I'll define all these. Then there's what's called a period of illness, period of decline, and then period of convalescence. And why I think it's important to know these terms is because this is going to help you understand the path and the progress of not just the coronavirus, but really any kind of, almost any kind of infectious illness. The incubation period is when you first come in contact with whatever the infectious pathogen is. And you may not exhibit symptoms, but the important thing to keep in mind is you could potentially pass the illness on to somebody else. So when you have somebody who's confidently telling you, well, I don't have any symptoms, so I couldn't be infectious, you now are armed with information to counter that factually and say, well, actually, you have no idea, because many illnesses have a long enough incubation period. Coronavirus is about a week, give or take, where you could be a carrier of the illness, pass it on, and not even know it. And that is probably why it spread as much as it has, because it has a incubation period that's long enough for people to contract it, not know they have it, and then enter in the prodromal period. Prodromal just means running before in Latin. And then prodromal is when you start to have that first little tickle in the back of the throat, or maybe you feel a temperature coming on. That's when the symptoms are just starting to show up in the second or prodromal phase. That's when people think, oh, I'm infectious. And yeah, you probably are. But keep in mind, you also could have been infectious even before that. Okay? No matter what you were doing to treat it, even if you're being very preventative or prophylactic, as we're going to talk about in the second half of the lecture with herbs and things. Okay, so once you go through the prodromal period, you're going to enter a period of illness. And keep in mind, you don't have to progress through all of these periods of illness. You can actually stop at any time, either for a reason like your body takes care of the pathogen right away. And this is the idea, again, with vaccines, is you're introduced to the pathogen in some way that your body learns about it, because our immune system has this amazing memory, so that it's able to prepare itself. So when it comes in contact with the real thing, it's already got an immune response ready to mount, and it wipes it out before it can get into the next stage we're going to talk about, which is period of illness. So period of illness is when you have full-blown symptoms, okay? So I contracted something. I don't know if it's cold virus. I don't know if it's flu virus. But there was about a day and a half, maybe 2-day period where I was full on in it. And I was actually out of town getting my car serviced. So I ended up staying in a motel, which turned out to be the best thing because I was up and down most of the night with a fever. And I took advantage of the hotel's really nice bathtub and took a nice hot bath. And hot baths are one of the best things you can do because, as we'll talk about with herbalism, what we do is support the body's process as much as possible instead of suppress it, right? So the hot bath elevated my temperature, and that is the whole idea behind your body creating an inflammatory process or a fever, is to elevate the temperature because your body, again, is banking on, well, I'm going to lose some of my body tissues that are susceptible to high temperatures, but it's going to really ramp up my immune system, improve my circulation, and the heat will probably kill off, even by itself, many of the pathogens. So when you're taking a hot bath or drinking hot tea or wrapping yourself up, you're taking advantage of that concept. That makes sense. So after the period of illness, if you survive, which hopefully you will, then you enter into what's called a period of decline, okay? Some important things to keep in mind here. Yes, the illness is starting to wane because presumably your body has successfully mounted a defense against it. You still can be infectious, and you still can go backwards into the period of illness, have what's called a relapse. That happens, right? You feel better, you think it's over, and then maybe slip a little bit in your protocols, or let's say you're on prescription antibiotics, right? Not going to work against a virus, by the way, because they work on bacteria, but that's a whole nother discussion. But then you're in this period of decline, and let's say you think, I don't need to take those antibiotics, or I'm not going to do any more herbal stuff because I don't like the taste of that stuff anyway. Well, your body has also really thrown a lot of energy into making the pathogen go away, and it can be depleted. So your immune system can kind of get, let's say, sucker punched by the pathogen that can mount a response to come back. This is also when you can catch something else. Classically, in the elderly, this is when they would get pneumonia. Pneumonia is kind of it's kind of a bully. It's not really that strong, so it needs kind of a weak body to take hold. And this is often when something like that or another advantageous pathogen shows up in people in the period of decline. Okay, and then finally, the last phase is period of convalescence. And I know this is a lot of information, but the period of convalescence is important because that's when you're recovering. You're also still potentially infectious here. You're also still very vulnerable potentially to another infection, like myself, for example. I'm on about day 10 or 12 of this that I know of, and I'm in a period of convalescence now. If something like the coronavirus comes along and I'm presented to it, it's possible that I could catch it, at least more easily potentially than I would have if my immune system was robust and healthy and hadn't had to fight off whatever it is that I've got. Does that make sense? I hope all that makes sense, and I hope you find that useful. I know I do. In thinking about illnesses and also just in talking to people about it. Okay, so let's talk about herbs, right? So there's a few different ways to think about herbs when it comes to infectious type illnesses, and we're going to talk about kind of different classes of herbs. I'm going to try to keep it fairly simple, and then also give you some example of herbs that you could access that are going to help you maintain your health. So really herbs are kind of like concentrated medicines. They're also like concentrated nutrition in a green package, you could say. What my teacher used to say was it's great when somebody can just throw a little green noise into their system, meaning anything is going to be of benefit if you match the person to the herb correctly, right? So many herbs, the ones that you can use on a regular basis, daily for longer, medium, or even short periods of time, most of those herbs are very nutritive in their aspect, meaning that primarily how they're helping you is providing you with something that your body really needs, some kind of, maybe it's a vitamin or a mineral or enzyme or some other aspect that our bodies probably recognize because we've grown up with herbs for our entire existence. And when we get into our system, it just makes us feel better. We call those herbs tonic herbs, and they often act as preventatives when we take them regularly, because they're providing an extra boost of nutrition in some way that we probably won't get anywhere else, even from really nice vegetables, because herbs are very special that way. Another kind of classification for herbs that we like to talk about are adaptogens. And you may have heard this, especially in relationship to something like ginseng, which is one of the premier adaptogens. Basically, the way to think about adaptogens, just very briefly, is that they help us adapt. And what do they help us adapt to? Stress. Okay. So there's two kinds of stress, really. There's what's called distress or bad stress. And then there's actually good stress, believe it or not, called eustress. Really, all you have to think is that, if you like going on roller coasters and that kind of stresses you out, but it's also exciting, that's a good example of good stress, right? If you're somebody that is terrified and you just got stuck on a roller coaster because, I don't know, somebody made you do it, then that's probably an example of distress or bad stress for you. Now, if you were able to take a look at both of those people and just kind of measure what was going on in their system during that stressful, either good or bad, ride on the amusement park, you'd find that the person who was under good stress would be similar in terms of what kinds of chemicals their body was reacting to. Simple term for those is stress hormones. But at the end of the ride, they would come back to whatever their normal is much more quickly. Whereas it might be the case that the person who was really stressed out and hated going on the roller coaster originally, but did it just to be, part of the team, might end up with those stress chemicals in their system for a much longer period of time, because their anxiety was level got raised, and it wasn't really fun, and all these other things that contribute to them not having a good time. Now, you should also realize that I'm talking about stress and hormones. That must mean I'm talking about the endocrine system, okay? There's a relationship between the endocrine system, our nervous system, and our immune system. Those all three come together in a very important way to regulate many of the systems, all of the systems really in our body, and also are talking with each other constantly to help keep us in balance. So the idea with adaptogens then is there's a little talking that comes in from these herbs, in a sense, you could say, and that they're going to help our body buffer the stress, cut off the sharp ends of the stress, you could say, or allow us to maybe get stress, but then come back to our center, whatever that might be, homeostasis, much more easily, much more readily, and stay there, because that's when we're going to be at our most healthy, productive, and balanced. Hopefully that makes sense. So we use herbs for chronic issues. We use herbs for acute issues. They really shine when we use them on a regular basis for prevention. So let's say you've had a lot of stress in your life, and maybe you end up contracting something like the coronavirus. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it's just an example. That might be the time that you turn to an herb or a class of herbs or a formula of herbs that have more of a drug-like effect. Even though I really don't think of herbs as drugs, even though a lot of the drugs that we do take that are drugs, either over the counter or through prescription, are either based on herbs originally or even still have some herbs in them in some way, shape, or form. Probably the way that I could feel comfortable is thinking of herbs as crude drugs. And they're crude and compared to over-the-counter prescription medications, excuse me, because they aren't as standardized, basically. And there's different schools of thought about that. If you're an herbalist, you like it when it's not standardized, with a few exceptions, because that means you're getting as close to the plant's activity as possible. And my bias is almost always for the fresh plant. In fact, now that it's spring, I find myself nibbling on Oregon grape flowers, for example. They're really tasty. They're a little bit sour, a little bit bitter, and a little bit sweet. And they have their own kind of vital energy in them that I'm taking in when I just bend over like a goat and nibble on them. Now, that might seem weird to most people, but I'm taking advantage of that plant's vitality right away by taking a piece of it into my system. And it doesn't have to be very much to have an effect. So Oregon grape is a nice one to bring up because it's what's called an alterative or alterative. And basically what that means is it's altering the system in some way. A lot of herbs do that for benefit. And so the benefit is with Oregon grape is it's going to act on my liver primarily. And we like the herbs that act on the liver that are alternatives because they benefit the liver in a variety of different ways. Oregon grapes, a really good stimulant to the liver. It helps the liver produce bile, which is a waste product. And because the liver is the filter of the blood, it also affects that process. And because the liver has actually a great deal to do with our immune system, it can also help benefit our immune response. So that might be a good herb to take depending on what was going on with you in times of illness, including potentially the coronavirus. So there are a whole class of other herbs that have different effects on different parts of the body that are alteratives. We have different names for them. Nervines, help with the nerves, obviously. Cholagogue, that works on the gallbladder. Laxatives, well, you know what those do. So there are all sorts of classifications for herbs. And we're just going to kind of focus on herbs that are going to be helpful for prevention and for respiratory system issues, since that's what SARS or COVID-19 or the coronavirus is really going to go after. It's going to center on your probably lower respiratory tract more than anything else. Okay. Drink pause. All right. So if I haven't bored you yet to tears, then you're in good shape. All right. So let's talk about some preventative tonics. Let's talk about adaptogens, okay? And we have a lot of different adaptogens to choose from. There's one that I have been using throughout the course of my current illness as a tea, excuse me, and that is called Tulsi. Or as a friend of mine from Bangladesh pronounces it, Tulsi. They put their tongue right behind their teeth and kind of soften that tea a little bit. Anyway, Tulsi likes to grow near sacred sites, and that's where it gets its name, holy basil. There's a variety of different kinds of Tulsi basil. And there's a wonderful line of teas that are made with Tulsi as a base, and then they have things like turmeric or ginger or other things with them. Any of those would be really good, or just Tulsi by itself. The reason we like Tulsi is, again, it's an adaptogen, right? And so it has this ability to protect our organs from stress, from toxic things like metals that shouldn't be in our body, from pollutants. And it also helps us recover from physical exertion and respond well to stress. And it also has a ton of antimicrobial activity that's been scientifically documented. And it actually tastes pretty good. So that's a big plus, because with my clients, I'm always looking for patient compliance, right? And a tea is a really wonderful way to take an herb in, because you're also getting the power of water blended with that. And you could easily just be drinking a cup of Tulsi tea every day right now, and that would be a very good thing to do to help your body stay strong and vital and prevent potentially contracting an illness. So lots of things I could say about Tulsi, but it's a type of basil, if I didn't mention that, which is pretty cool, I think. And it's just, got a variety of uses. You could easily research more of it yourself, and that's what I'm going to encourage you to do with any of these suggestions I make, because they may or may not be the right herb for you. But Tulsi is definitely one that's easily accessible. It's inexpensive. You can even grow it. But right now it's still on the shelves because apparently people are grabbing all the toilet paper they can find and hand sanitizer, which, it's a good idea to sanitize your hands, but you're also wiping out the good bacteria that need to be there too. That's another discussion. I'm not saying don't use hand sanitizer, but I'm just pleading for moderation and common sense. Okay. So the other thing, wearing the mask, that's a great idea if you're infectious, if you're already infected, but probably not that practical if you're not. So And I don't know how many people I've already seen around town wearing a mask and then not following any other protocols. Meanwhile, they've worn that mask all day and it's losing its effectiveness because it's getting damper and moister and just funky in there. If you're breathing, not my idea of how to protect yourself. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. I get it. That's what makes you feel safe. Who am I to say? But yeah, you don't need to wear a mask unless you're concerned that you might be infectious and you're coming in contact with people who aren't infected, but you're concerned that you might infect, especially if they're a vulnerable population like I mentioned. Okay, so another herb to talk about. This is one that I mentioned in my many emails that some of you might have seen. That's Astragulus. Astragulus is a Chinese tonic herb. And there's that word tonic again. But it's also taken when people have symptoms that show up. Obviously, it shines preventatively, but it's a really great herb to take in the event that you have some needs of being buffered in your immune system. There are two main contraindications with Astragulus. I'm not aware of any directly with Tulsi, which we just talked about, but Astragulus, sometimes because it's in the legume family, people are allergic to pea family stuff, so you want to make sure that you're not one of those. If you have a mild sensitivity, you might have a little bit more gas than you would like. You'll have to weigh if it's worth it or not to take Astragulus. That's your issue. The other thing is, you do not want to take Astragulus when you have an active fever. And the reason for that is Astragulus is so good at strengthening what's called in Chinese medicine our wei qi, or our outer qi, that it can actually trap heat in your body, right? And that's not a good thing when you have a fever because you can overheat, and we know what happens when that happens. Things start melting, it gets ugly in a hurry. So you want to take Astragulus when you don't have a fever present. The thing about Astragulus is, I mentioned the wei qi. Wei qi is basically the Western version of wei qi is our outermost immunity. It's what kind of is our first line of defense and protects us from things that come in. The other nice thing I like about Astragulus is it's a really great, like Tulsi, it's a really great lung herb. It strengthens the lung meridian in Chinese medicine, and we know from our studies that in the Western world that it has great benefit for strengthening the lung tissue. And it's also been studied against cancer, other pathogens, even HIV. And most of the information we have from a scientific herbal perspective agrees with the thousands and thousands of years of Chinese wisdom that this is a really wonderful herb to take advantage of. If you're going to make a tea of it, what I recommend is that you do what's called a cold decoction, okay? And so when you make most teas, especially beverage teas, you're making what's called a tisane or an infusion. You just pour boiling hot water over it, let it sit, da-da-da. Now you've got your beverage tea. What I like to do with medicinal teas is if you've got a tea bag, I cut that tea bag open and I dump it into my cup, or if I'm making a lot of tea, which I like to do, I'll put it into a quart jar. All the herbs are loose in there, so they get more contact with the water and make it better, stronger, more medicinal as opposed to beverage tea. And with Astragulus, with a cold decoction, you actually start off with room temperature water and let it steep overnight and then warm it up to your desired temperature the next day. That's kind of ideal. With the herbs still in the water, you're warming it up. You don't have to do it that way, but that's the elegant herbal way to do it. And if you're like me, I have kind of a wolf stomach. I like to actually, with all those loose herbs in there, I drink them down. The only time I don't do that is if it's a beverage tea of some kind that I've added that might have some essential oils or something that would be hard for me to digest or break down, like barks or roots or something really heavy. But you get to make that call. That way I feel like I'm honoring the herb, and the essence of the herb is also honoring me by going into my body, not just the water extract. But it's totally okay just to do water extract too. I am obviously all in with the herbs, so that's my process. A few more things about Astragulus. It's a really good obviously warming herb because its ability to keep the chi or the heat energy in the body. So it's a great herb to use if you're going outside a lot or you're going to be around people a lot. And it helps moisten the lungs. Sometimes people take astragalus with ginseng because they're very, very complementary. In fact, if you're a younger person, astragalus is probably your herb because it's keeping all that energy in. And I don't know about you, but most young people I'm around always seem to be giving their energy away for free. And I'm like, hey, can I have some? But they're often taking ginseng because they've heard, ooh, ginseng for energy. Well, you can do ginseng at any age, but if you're going to do it when you're young, you should combine it with astragalus and also something called red dates if you're making tea. That's a whole nother story. But ginseng's kind of for people that are outside of their 20s for the most part, unless you've got a real endurance or activity reason to take ginseng. Because ginseng does the opposite of astragalus. It takes our inner core energy and makes sure it goes everywhere in our body. And it's very yang herb or yang, meaning it's really intense. And so you can easily get too much of it. But it's another adaptogen that would also be useful for stress. And now that I'm an old man, I find I can actually handle ginseng. Usually I mix it with other stuff though. I guess I'm just a very young individual. It's not necessarily something I need a lot of, but I do like it. So that's astragalus. A couple other herbs to focus on that are adaptogens. There's something called Chinese asparagus root. There's a Ayurvedic counterpart called shatavari. And asparagus root is another tonic herb, and as is shatavari, which is the Indian asparagus root. Either one of those are good. They're a really good lung herb and a really good energy herb. And they are purported to increase the Shen. And in Taoist philosophy, Shen is basically like spirit. And since we're also interested in shamanic and spirit things here, this is a really wonderful herb to take at any time to increase your connection to spirit or Shen, your inner connection as well as your outer connection. So it opens up your heart. It tonifies the heart energy and the kidney energy. And it's in Chinese medicine, it's said to help the lungs extract qi, right? Because there's all different kinds of qi. And so the lungs are, in Chinese belief, bringing in qi from the air, essentially, and helping the body utilize it. So asparagus root can help with that. Again, it's an adaptogen, right? So it's going to be good for stress. And I find in people that have emotional instability, maybe they're going through a tough time or that's just an issue they have, this can be a really good herb for them. So really wonderful thing to consider taking that again as a tea, and it's a root. So you're probably going to want to decoct it, meaning to actually boil at a very low temperature, covered your asparagus root. Okay. One more to talk about. This is another kind of ginseng you may have heard of called Siberian ginseng, primarily because the Russians were the ones who really brought this to the forefront, although it had been around for a long, long time in Chinese medicine. But they were looking for something that they could grow or use that wasn't regular ginseng. And they looked up Eleutherococcus, which is a long name, but that's what it's called. And I realized that this was actually going to be pretty good for their athletic program, their space program, and all that stuff. So Siberian ginseng is a really interesting plant. We have a counterpart here that's called Devil's Club. Not interchangeable, but has some similar properties. And then there's another similar plant, and all these are ginseng family plants, called Aurelia, which there's a few different varieties that grow here in Southern Oregon and Northern California. All of them have an affinity for the lungs, and they also have an affinity for energy. And right now, this is one of the best things to take for strengthening your lungs and giving you a calming kind of energy that's not going to buzz you out. which sometimes the regular ginseng you're used to can do. I tend to, excuse me, I tend to radiate towards taking this kind of ginseng more than the Panax ginseng, just because it seems to have a real affinity for me, and it's really good, not just for lung stuff, but for depression, and depression can affect your immune system. We call it immunodepression. And honestly, sometimes I have trouble with that, particularly in the winter time, and I find that this is one of the things that can be really helpful for that. Really nice thing to consider. All right, so those 4 are ones that we focused on. Other ones I want to mention would be ashwagandha. Okay, and you can look that one up. That's a really nice adaptive tonic. Another really good one is Reishi Mushroom, Ganoderma. That's a really wonderful immune tonic. There are a lot of really good mushroom immune tonics. That's just one of them. Some people, provided they don't have heart issues or high blood pressure or adrenal issues, licorice root is really good. And if you can get Chinese licorice root, it's much kinder on your system. Any of those are going to be really good adaptogens. So a little bit of time left to talk about alternatives. Okay, you may have looked at the email I sent. One of the most important ones that I think we could take right now, particularly if you feel some symptoms coming on, because it's not a tonic herb. It's not something you want to take like the other herbs that we just mentioned long term. It's something you want to take while you're actually dealing with a cold or flu virus or the coronavirus, and that is Lomatium root. And the root, the name of the root in Latin is Lomatium dissectum. Tastes nasty, but it does a job, and it's shown some in vitro, meaning test tube, basically, effects against something called the rotavirus, which can be a nasty enterovirus or digestive system virus that often attacks children. And that's pretty significant. Now, does that mean it's going to work against coronavirus? Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. We do know that historically Lomatium was used by First Nations people against the flu epidemic of 1918, 1916, that era. And according to anecdotal reports, which again, not scientific, was really effective in protecting them. And in part, I'm sure that's because of Lomatium's wonderful supportive nature towards our lung system and our entire respiratory system. So Lomatium's a really wonderful herb. It has proven antiviral effects, and definitely would be something I would take if I started to show more serious symptoms than I did. The other thing I might partner with it is another wonderful herb called Osha Root, and Osha Root is the ligusticum. Both Osha and Lomatium are in the Umbelliferae family, or Apiaceae, wild carrot family, because they have really wonderful, beautiful flowers shaped like a basket or an umbrella. And the root and Osha is really powerful lung stuff. It's also used in sacred medicine with peyote ceremony for nausea, and it's bear medicine. Bears actually dig it up and eat it. It's so good. They will, and I've seen bear digs where they've chewed up the whole root. So, you know, if you're aware, and we're animal people here, I know on this channel, there's a whole bunch of wonderful stories from native tradition about the relationship between bear and Osha root. In fact, one of my little kitties looks like a bear cat, so his name's Osha. So I love Osha. All right. Now there's a lot of lung herbs you could be taking in addition to those two. Those are kind of premier. So anything that you come across in your studies that are telling you that they're going to support the lungs in some way are worth trying. I could toss out a bunch of names to you, but what we'll probably do is end up helping you with some links later on that you can have access to. But elecampane root is another good lung herb. Another good lung herb is sanicle or snake root. You know, the list goes on and on and on. But if you do your own research and you look up some of these herbs, you also want to make sure that you check out what kind of contraindications there are, and try to match whatever symptoms you have with the knowledge of the herb. And then that will help you avoid any side effects, which herbs don't really have, but anything that could be problematic. And of course, you want to be careful if you're taking medication of any kind already when you take an herb, because it can disrupt how your body processes that, because a lot of these herbs work on the liver, and they can change the way your body, like I said, processes or even detoxifies an herb. So herbs are not little teddy bears. Even though we love them, they are powerful beings and they need to be respected. So make sure you do your homework, or ask a knowledgeable herbalist like myself, or somebody in your community who can really guide you competently. Okay, so I think that's probably close to what I have to share, and it's a little after 5 now, so I want to respect the clock. We've got about 20 plus minutes left.
Okay, Lawrence, thank you. What we're going to do next is do our ceremony, because Lawrence has to leave exactly at 4:30 or 5:30. And therefore I want to do, we've already done the call-in. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to have us all remember that. And we're going to do a ceremony. It's going to be really powerful, but it's going to be short. Because spirits don't need a lot of time. They're outside of time.
And then Carla, are we going to have time for questions afterwards, or what do you think?
Yeah, we're going to do the ceremony, and
Great.
then I'm going to turn it back to you for questions.
Super cool.
Okay. Double check that I'm on the right microphone. There we go. Can you hear me okay? Thumb up, Florence? Okay.
Very well. I heard you switch microphones too, so
Great.
quality's good.
Taking a deep breath, stepping back into your sacred circle. We remember the spirits of the north who came. We remember the spirits of the northeast, the beautiful integrated forest. We remember the spirits of the east, our ancestors and the she. We remember the spirits of the southeast, knowledge of medicine, of the ancient ways. We remember the spirits of the south, our tribes, our teachers, our home. We remember the spirits of the southwest, earth, her elements, and her stalwardness. We remember the spirits of the west, the spirit canoe who ferries us betwixt between the shimmering gateways of the world, the gateway of twilight. We remember the spirits of the northwest, grandmother of the silver cup and the beautiful water that facilitates everything. And we open now the gateway of the stars above, and we call us to center with our sacred tree. Merging with her, feel our roots as the earth, our bough as the stars, and see us in a circle together, all of us in harmony with the forest, the power animals, the teachers, and the spirits who support us. We ask our teachers to step forward and create a center of our circle that will contain massive power. You will see an object of some kind, something. Connecting to that object, we raise our hands to the sky and we call for the gateways to open and for the creative life force, this blue and white light of all the power of creation itself to come down and illuminate our entire circle and form around us an egg of multi-dimension an absolute protection. Be with that egg. We ask now for the gateways of the directions to open and the power of those directions to come through and fill the center with the power of Phoenix. Absolute transfiguration. Take a moment to put your apprehension, your worries for your lovers, and your friends, and your moms, and your dads, and our community, to put all that into the center and let Phoenix transfigure it. And now, we call the circles beyond the circles, and the circles beyond those circles of compassionate ones to come. The miracle we are reaching for tonight is community. It's a miracle to protect our loved ones, to protect us, to protect our community, and to give us a gracious path through this corona condition. See your teacher now. Command the power of the stars, of the directions, of sweet earth herself, and center that power into the object in the center for you. Touch that center now. And carry that power into every single iota of you. Your interstitial iotas. All of you. All of you. And we ask that the dragons come, the middle world phoenix, whose wings are the surface between the worlds, the four dragons to come. Behold the center and expand it outward as a rainbow of light around our homes, around our communities, and all those that we intend for protection. Your teacher will give you an egg for your personal form. Receive it now. And let it encompass you. And we ask now that this center go out throughout the world to rebalance and to heal, to support those in the hospitals who are overwhelmed, to give the people who need to make decisions good judgment, to relieve fear, and to support the economics of people who are impacted. We ask. And so it is. Looking around the circle, see yourselves, and we smile at each other and give each other real hugs because we can. Yeah. And we see how our trees, their roots interlace, and the heavens entangling sweetly with our leaves, connecting to the sweetness of the mother. As above, so below, as within, so without. Go now, holding this power within you. That was good for me. I hope it was good for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a blessing.
So, Lawrence, it's question and answer time. I'm going to do my best to drive this train. I am going to put us onto, I can see everybody's. What I need from you is to raise your hand. Let me see where I can see the raise your hand thing. You can unmute yourselves. Let's just go ahead and let it be general chaos. Unmute yourself if you wish to ask a question and just ask it.
Lawrence.
Yes.
It's Paula. Paula way at the top.
Hi, Paula.
What about Paudarco? The bark.
Yeah. Are you taking it now?
I have been, yes.
For-
One, just like 500 megs a
Okay.
day for the last few weeks.
Okay. For this issue specifically, we've been
Well, I
talking?
caught a cold a week and a half ago, and now I have a sinus infection, so I'm just backing myself up. But it was good to hear your information. I wondered what you thought about Paudarco.
Well, okay. So my experience with Palo Arco goes back to, oh my God, what was that pop illness everybody had? Can't even remember the name of it now. Things come in trends. I like Palo Arco. It's okay for what you're doing, and if you feel like it's working, then that's fine. You mentioned sinus infection, so I'm going to toss an herb out at you for sinus infections specifically.
Oh, good.
It's called Yerba Mansa.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Heard of it.
Yeah, Anomopsis is the species name, the genus name, sorry. It's really good for sinus because it's astringent. It's also two very unusual qualities in one herb, and it also has its own natural eugenol or clove oil in it, so it's good for pain. And you can actually, you can actually get a tincture, make a tea of it, and put it in a neti pot, provided everything's sterile and disinfected, and get it right up in there. But you can take a tincture and just hold it in your mouth, and it'll permeate the tissues and sinuses and really do a good job there. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You bet.
Appreciate that.
You're
I'll
welcome.
let somebody else ask a question.
Okay. Thanks, Paula.
Lawrence, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
This
Who are
is,
you?
sorry,
Who are you?
Gail.
Gail. Okay.
You mentioned an email a couple of times.
I did.
How do we get the email?
Well, you might be on Carla's email list, so she, I think, is on mine, so she could maybe forward that or something. I don't know, Carla.
Why don't you just take that email, copy, paste it, and add whatever you want to it from this, and we'll send it out.
Okay. Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
Say it again,
I'm
maybe.
saying Lawrence and I are going to get together, and we'll come up with an email we send out that has all the information on it.
Right.
There you go.
Great. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking, Gail.
Hi,
Lainey
it's
has a question.
hi, it's Lainey. Last year I wound up getting a valley fever in my lungs. It's a fungal infection.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if there's a particular herb that I could use to protect myself.
What'd you do last time?
They gave me antifungal medication that was really bad for me, I think. Made my hair fall out and stuff. And then they told me that I couldn't take anything anymore and just let my body take care of it.
Wow. Yeah.
And a lot of ceremony we did with this woman.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you cleared it?
I'm not sure. It was made a pretty big hole in my lung.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. Paul, I think it was, you mentioned Tahibo or Palo Arco.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you live in the desert? Where do you live?
I live in Phoenix.
Okay. There's a really wonderful Palo Arco, and I'm going to turn you on to a really local, wonderful herbalist who went to school the same year I did in 2000. His name's Charles Kane. Charlie Kane. He's written a number of books. He's excellent. He's a good source for a lot of different medicines.
Okay.
And you tell him I sent you. But what you're looking for is something called Chalopsis. And I'll spell that for you. Chilopsis. Its common name is desert willow.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful herb. It smells really lovely. The flowers are lovely. It's in the Bignoniaceae family, if I remember correctly, which is related to Palo Arco or Tahibo. It's just a more local one to you. And it's got some play with desert fever, valley fever.
Okay.
But talk to Charlie. He's got a website, Charles Kane, and he'd be a really good resource for you for all things herbal. And he's a Arizona guy. So I think he's in Tucson. So not too far.
Okay. Yeah, that's not. All right. Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Wow, that's great to know. I have many Chalopsis growing.
Oh yeah, they're amazing. Amazing. Love Chalopsis. Yeah.
Anybody else have question? Harmony.
I'd like to know what your thoughts are on oregano oil.
Well, my understanding of oregano oil is that it's primarily marketed as an antioxidant. And we like antioxidants because they do just what they say. They scavenge oxidative chemicals and things. And we don't like oxidative processes unless we're controlling them, our body is, because they can cause damage to tissues through free radicals. So that's my understanding of one of the main, primary uses of oregano oil. The other thing I like about oregano oil is you're not going to really harm the earth by using it. We can grow oregano just about anywhere and plenty of it. So, so I'm fine with it. It's not one of my go-to herbs regularly, but I know a lot of people like it, and it's popular, and I don't see anything wrong with taking it. So, if it's what works for you, more power to you. That's how I feel about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Next question. A lot of you don't have your cameras on, so I can't see you if you have a question. You just have to take yourself off mute or use your chaga. Hegye wants to ask about chaga.
Oh, chaga. Yeah. What did I have with chaga in it? I had something, I think it was I think it was a probiotic drink. It was not kefir, but the other stuff. And I liked it. It was good. So chaga is this really wonderful mushroom that grows, interestingly enough, on my namesake, birch trees in the taiga, or the tundra forests in the north. So really powerful, really traditional Russian immune tonic, kind of all-purpose. And it's a really wonderful adaptogen-like tonic to take for a wide variety of things. Well, the Russians like it in tea because it's a wood type mushroom. It's pretty woody itself, so it really needs to be broken down and cooked if you're going to make tea with it, which is traditional. If you're going to make capsule, make sure that it's available because it can pass right through your system unless it's been broken up properly. But yeah, double thumbs up, triple thumbs up. If I could raise my other toe for chaga, really good choice. Highly approve.
We have a question from Charlotte about repairing lung damage. Charlotte, do you want to speak your question?
Say, well, I have had pneumonia twice now, and they finally discovered the lung damage has been there for years, and they said, but you can repair it. They just, All they've given me is breathing exercises.
Okay. I'm going to give you another breathing exercise, and don't get mad at me. But have you heard of something called laughter yoga,
No.
Charlotte? Okay. I want you to look up laughter yoga because it's a much more fun way to get your lungs back in shape than doing boring breathing exercises. There's some great videos about it, and I think you'll really take to it.
Okay.
So Charlotte, Astragulus is your friend. That's a good rebuilding tonic, and so is the wild asparagus root, Shatavari. One or both of those would be a good thing for you to get on. Take a look at them, and you're gonna have my contact info, so you can get back to me if you want to with questions. That's true for everybody. And yes, it's yerba mansa, not
Mansa. Okay.
M-A-N-S.
I'm looking it up right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it best as a tincture or pills?
I would probably take it as a tincture because you're going to get the effect of the alcohol, which is beneficial with what's going on with you. You could probably take it as capsule if you wanted to. That'd be all right. Not the best tea because of the alcohol needing to make some of the properties more available than water, but I've seen people do it too. So tincture, capsule, tea, in that order.
Okay. Got it.
Yep.
Let's have one or two more questions for our darling Lawrence.
Yes, our darling Lawrence. I like how you say that.
Oh, yeah. Go back, darling.
We do. Well, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah, Lawrence and I studied shamanism. We were in the same practice group, the study group, same study group together for years, where we met every other weekend, went deep and went far. Oh, yeah.
Very much.
We do retreats on the Oregon beach.
Oh, uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That sounds
Next
good.
question.
Hi, Lawrence, I want to say thank you, first of all. That was wonderful.
Oh, good.
And Carla, thank you for hosting that. Thank you so much for that. It really means a lot. Lawrence, I'm struggling with Lyme disease, and I take a lot of things already. And I can't, with the medication I'm on right now, I cannot take any alcohol. So I'm just, and I use ashwagandha, but I'm wondering if there's something else I should add. I'm taking vitamins and A and E and all, all that stuff. And turmeric for a cytokine storm.
Okay. Have you heard of an herb called teasel?
Yes.
Have you tried teasel?
I haven't tried it, but I can.
Well, I would take a look at it. You've got a lot going on in your system, and it may or may not be appropriate, but that's it's a Chinese remedy for basically for Lyme disease, and that's one that is worth checking out. It might be one more tool to add to your toolkit, or it might be the tool. We'd have to probably spend more time than we have right now figuring out how it was manifesting for you to really zero in on it. But that's what comes to mind, and it's definitely worth checking out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, we're going to honor and respect that Lawrence has a podcast that he's going to be doing, and he needs to leave at 5:30 in order to make his podcast. Will you tell us about your podcast?
Oh, I'd love to tell you about my podcast, Carla. Thank you so much for asking. It's co-hosted with a friend of mine named Michael Espinoza. He and I are both psychic readers. He's also a pranic healer, and so we're very complementary. It's called the Psychic Funhouse, and it really is fun, and it's really a fun house. And it's every Friday from 6 to 7. It's a call-in. It's on Blog Talk Radio. So you're welcome to call in and get a reading and find out what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about how to find a good psychic and if your psychic is good for you, good match. So.
Or you'll be talking about these herbs when people call in.
Well, that could happen, but we're pretty good at staying on target. We'll have to have another podcast later on about that. Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right. I want to thank you, Lawrence, and I mostly thank all of you people and the spirits who came. I am so appreciative that you've done this conversation with us, Lawrence, and shared all this incredible information. I'm appreciative of the spirits putting that shimmering egg around us. I appreciate Joanna showing us the power of the shimmering egg, and I appreciate our Zoom circle that created that ceremony and understood how to call the power in, and we've been developing it. And I am deeply honor each of you for coming, and all of those who are listening to the recording, and may the ceremony be as rich and strong for you. I'm Carla Meske, SpiritHealer.com, shamanic healing, shamanic education, full program in shamanism, all on Zoom. Yeah, perfect for our times. And Lawrence Birch is at, you go ahead and say where they can find you, Lawrence.
Sure thing. So, and I also want to thank everybody, Carla especially, and the spirits, of course, and the wonderful plant people for helping make this happen and giving me the opportunity to share with you. So my business name is Giving Tree Farm Herb Company, and you can access that through my phone number, 541-344-7534, by texting me, and I can get you hooked up with information.
And you're on Facebook too, right?
I am. Yep, Giving Tree Farm Herbs on Facebook. And then I also have a website that I'm revitalizing, givingtreefarm.com. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning, if you're interested in becoming a client of record of mine, I'm happy to provide you with the over 250 different herbs that I work with to help you attain your health, retain your health, and become the healthiest you can. So, yeah.
Lawrence, you're the best. My horse York thanks you. York is one of Lawrence's clients.
Well,
yeah,
great guy. Yeah,
he's a great guy, isn't he?
Yeah, and so are you, Carla.
All right, love you very much. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all later at the next pop-up circle or journey circle. Just stay on top of the emails.
Stay healthy and
Thank you.
well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you for everything.
You're welcome.